Get Out of Your Head by Jennie. We have bought the lie that we are victims of our thoughts rather than warriors equipped to fight on the front lines of the greatest battle of our generation, the battle of our minds. The Bible records his bold declaration that we are to take every thought captive to obey Christ. Learning to capture our thoughts matters because how we think shapes how we live. We know now that the brain is constantly changing, whether or not we intend for it to. Our emotions were leading us to thoughts, and those thoughts were dictating our decisions, and our decisions were determining behaviors, and then the behaviors were shaping our relationships, all of which would take us back to either healthy or unhealthy thoughts. The reality is that our emotions are a byproduct of something else. Our emotions are the byproduct of the way we think. Not only can our thoughts be changed, but we can be the ones to change them. The average person has more than 30,000 thoughts per day. Of those, so many are negative that according to researchers, the vast majority of the illnesses that plague us today are a direct result of a toxic thought life. But what if, instead of trying to take every thought captive, we took just one thought captive? What if I told you that every one beautiful, powerful thought could shift this chaotic spiral of your life for the better every time you thought it? Every lie we buy into about ourselves is rooted in what we believe about God. No human is ever meant to be the person who fills our souls or holds in place our worth. Only God can do that. When we begin to think about our thoughts, perhaps for the first time, we can stop the downward spiral. We can reset and redirect them. Not that we would wrestle each and every fear, but that we would allow God to take up so much space in our thinking that our fears will shrink in comparison. Doubt steals hope, and with no hope, everything that matters doesn't feel as important anymore. The danger of toxic thinking is it produces an alternate reality, one in which distorted reasoning actually seems to make sense. God is real and I am valuable. My life matters. He is real. I was fighting, and in Christ I was given the authority and power to win. If mental illness is a struggle you face, may I please wrap loving arms around you, look you in the eyes, and whisper, this, your anxiety or depression or bipolar disorder or suicidal thoughts is not your fault. You may be suffering from a true chemical breakdown in your body. I am not suggesting that you can think your way out of mental illness. I am not. I have experienced seasons of anxiety so brutal that I was paralyzed. There are seasons when we need help in the form of counseling and medicine. You can, in fact, change in an instant. Science proves we can. Day by day, we fight to be the captors of our thoughts rather than the ones taken captive. You and I have been equipped with power from God to tear down the strongholds in our minds, to destroy the lies that dominate our thought patterns. We have the power and authority to do this. I thought I was a victim of the negativity rising within me. Do you relate to what I'm saying? Have you also spent way too much of your life believing you are a victim to your thoughts? Paul tells us that we don't have to live this way, that we can take captive our thoughts. What we're saying then is that how we think directly results in how we live. The singular interrupting thought is this one: I have a choice. You have a choice regarding where you focus your energy. You have a choice regarding what you live for. We are not subject to our behaviors, genes, or circumstances. We are not subject to our thoughts. Now, we rarely get to choose our circumstances, but Paul said we have a choice about how we think about those sometimes challenging things. Every spiral can be interrupted. No fixation exists outside God's long-armed reach. Because we are a new creation, we have a choice. He has given us the power and the tools and His Spirit to shift the spiral. When we think new thoughts, we physically alter our brains. When we think new thoughts, we make healthier neural connections. When we think new thoughts, we blaze new trails. When we think new thoughts, everything changes for us. What we think about, our brains become. What we fixate on is neurologically who we will be. It all comes down to a thought, and then another thought, and then another thought after that. First, of course, we have to remind ourselves that change is possible. Let me say it again. We have a choice. And the more often we grab hold of that truth, the easier it will be to interrupt the downward spiral of our thoughts. As we practice the art of interruption, we're shifting to a whole new mindset, and with each shift, we will find ourselves growing more and more into the mind of Christ. When we're spiraling in noise or distractedness, we have a choice to shift our minds back to God through stillness. When we're spiraling in isolation, we have a choice to shift our minds back to God through community. In the same way, you may find that some thoughts, once interrupted, will simply lose their power. God can do this. Our thoughts, however, may require daily capturing and redirecting, or hourly, in some cases more often than that. But those deadly thoughts can be captured. They can be contained. The battle for our minds is won as we focus on Jesus every moment, every hour, every day. The good news is this. Once we recognize that a prevailing emotion is connected to outright life-sucking lies, we begin to see that everything we need for life in God has been given to us already, which means we begin to heal and live lives that matter. I can make a mental shift, and by changing my mind, I can change my emotions, which interrupts that entire progression we looked at earlier that results in how I'm experiencing life. We begin by being aware of what we are thinking about, by zeroing in on the thought and identifying it for what it is. If we want to stop our patterns of toxic thinking, we must notice what's happening and take action, countering any lies we believe about God with the truth that interrupts the downward spiral. And here we sit in a post-truth society, bombarded with promises of happiness, wealth, fulfillment, and all our dreams met. Yet we are miserably unhappy. Why? Because for all the good that self-help does, that help always comes up short in the end. But we don't simply need our spiraling thoughts to stop. We need our minds to be redeemed. Our minds exchanged for the mind of Christ. We are not made to think more good thoughts about ourselves. We are made to experience life and peace as we begin to think less about ourselves and more about our Creator and about others. The only true self-help is for us as followers of Jesus to believe who we are as daughters and sons of the King of the universe, and to know that our identities are secured by the shed blood of God's own Son. We do have a part to play, but our effort won't take us across the finish line if there is no outside force shifting the inside of us. What do you do once you take a thought captive? You then submit that thought to Christ. That is how you experience a new mind, a new identity, a new way to live, one that's Spirit-empowered. But self-help can offer only a better version of yourself. Christ is after a whole new you. And that one thought multiplies into many thoughts that develop into a mindset, often without our even realizing it. One God-honoring thought that has the potential to change the trajectory of both history and eternity. The epicenter of the battleground, the source of every word and deed that comes out of your mouth and life, begins in your thought life. Your first objective is to capture the thought, to have the courage to face that defining destructive thought and interrupt it. I have a choice. But I have better news. Capturing thoughts and then believing the truth will inform and shape every aspect of your life and give you peace and joy that transcend your circumstances. This is God-given peace that surpasses understanding for our seasons of suffering. You, as a believer, are a citizen of another reality. Let's learn to think like it. If one of the greatest tools of the enemy is confusion, when we are confused, he wins the day. Every toxic thought, spiraling emotional cycle, and trap of the enemy we fall for somehow deep down involves a wrong belief about God. A mindset on the flesh leads to sin and death, and a mindset on the spirit leads to life and peace. That is the simple reality we face. Standing between us and victory is one of three barriers, or perhaps all three. The devil, our wounds, our sin. Because of Jesus, every fight has been ultimately won. Victory? It's already yours. It's already mine. What's left for us is to claim that victory. In the stillness and quiet, not only do we connect with God, but we are also able to more clearly identify what is wrong. Recognizing our spirals and naming them is the first step in interrupting them. Real, connected, intimate time with Jesus is the very thing that grows our faith, shifts our minds, brings about revival in our souls, and compels us to share Jesus with others. It's where the spiral stops. Behind every one of these fears is a lie. I cannot face God as I am. All we can see at first is the mess. Here's the truth. We are messed up, every one of us, which is exactly why we need time with God alone, in quiet, where we can hear his healing voice. The truth is that God, who is the creator and sovereign over the universe, and the God who conquered sin and death, is the same God who wants to be with you in your pain, doubt, shame, and other circumstances. When we turn off the constant distractions and sit quietly before God, focusing intently on his word and really meditating on it, a few things happen. Scientists have found that the brains of people who spend untold hours in prayer and meditation are different. Inappropriate thoughts can be combated with positive thoughts, such as thinking of a new hobby, playing music, repeating an inspiring quote, or some other positive activity. The kind of brainwaves present during relaxation increases and anxiety and depression decrease. Your brain stays younger for longer. We find one who is willing to help us and able to help us, and thus uniquely poised to intervene. Connection with God is the foundation for every other God-given tool we have to fight with. We begin here because if supernatural change is what we want, we have to go to our supernatural God to find it. In other words, we can cognitively reframe our situations with the new pattern looking like this. Negative emotion and reason, so I will choice. You have the word, you have light, you have life. For in Christ Jesus, we are free. Feeling seen and loved. This is absolutely everything, the foundation and framework from which we build and thrive. Community is essential. We find ourselves in a generation that has made an idol out of the very thing God is calling us away from, independence. We are village people, built to be known and loved and seen. When we listen to lies about our worth, we naturally back away from others. In many cases, our distancing behavior succeeds in pushing people away, reinforcing our fear of rejection.